you ready?
Takes the snap and goes down on a knee. Counted down. The students are pouring onto the field. Ole Miss has knocked off #1 Alabama.
Well, the Rebels win 23-17 over the #3 ranked and #1 ranked, according to CBS, Alabama Crimson Tide. A program-defining moment, Browning probably the most important and biggest win in Ole Miss football history. The goalposts came down. The fans were all over the place. Huge weekend in Oxford. The Rebels remain unbeaten.
Just special, just something that we will remember for the rest of our lives. And this team is 5-0, the first time since the 60s, and it's incredible. It's just incredible that how far this program has come under Hugh Freeze, and so much going on right now with this program. But you got to put this one in the bag and look ahead, because you got a tough SEC slate that begins on Saturday.
Yeah, of course, that audio coming from the Ole Miss IMG Sports Network and the voice of the Rebels, David Kellum. The Rebels getting, like we said, a huge win. But #3 in the polls, tied with the Pups down in Starkville. Big weekend coming up in College Station. Billy Liucci of TexAgs.com. He helps out with the Mernon Wright Report, a CRM Sports Network show. You can hear that across the Lone Star State of Texas. We're going to be talking about that. If you want to join the conversation, 800-621-0042. Visit us on Facebook and Twitter. We will be right back. Stick with us. This is Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're back on Hotty Toddy Hotline talking about a huge Rebel victory over the Alabama Crimson Tide and looking ahead in just a little bit with Billy Liucci of TexAgs.com at the College Station matchup this weekend. The Ole Miss Rebels head to the Texas A&M Aggies to Kyle Field, Browning a huge matchup for Ole Miss and Texas A&M, a huge SEC West defining matchup. But we're talking the Alabama game, like I just kind of mentioned under my breath. The Ole Miss team was sort of dominated by Alabama early, and it wasn't, the score doesn't reflect it, but a lot of big runs by T.J. Yeldon, Kenyon Drake before his really gruesome injury. We're thinking about Kenyon. Hopefully he recovers quickly. But it was a big day for Ole Miss, a great finish for Ole Miss. Stuck with it, regardless of the score. We're down 14-3 at some point. At one point, Ole Miss comes up, scores with LaCron Treadwell to get things rolling.
All started with number 14, Bo Wallace. We've seen good Bo, we've seen bad Bo over the last 3 years.
We've seen Bama game Bo.
Exactly. He's been 0-2 against Alabama, and this game I saw a player I'd never seen before, Connor. Just someone who looked extremely comfortable, someone who knew that it was his time, and he delivered early, and he played well throughout the whole game. And yeah, you're right. It all started as he connected with Laquan and
kind of got the ball rolling.
Yeah.
But you look at it and say, I was in that end zone right near the Alabama bench and on the field, and you looked at it, and he throws that first pass. I think it was to Cody Core, and double coverage with corners and the safety over the top. So ultimately, it was triple coverage. And I'm thinking, oh no, Bo.
Me too.
Come on. And I think everybody was. It was really a period of time where we were scared of what Bo was going to come back out for that second series. A field goal, of course, I believe, on that first series, and a few missed field goals. Going to have to work that out. Freeze says there's going to be some kind of changes up in the kicker game. But then, boy, we thought that extra point was going to come back to bite us there at the end of the game.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the scoring. You have a really kind of a dormant time there for the first half. Ultimately, the entire first half. Going into halftime, it was 14-3 Alabama, but for much of the first half, it was 3-0 Ole Miss. Alabama didn't score until the 3:44 mark in the second quarter. Blake Sims faked to T.J. Yeldon and ran outside, faked everybody out.
Yeah, play action.
I thought the play was stuffed.
Yeah, he faked the cameraman.
He faked me out, and I was standing right there.
He faked all of us. So that put them up early. But then the next time Alabama scored, a lot of controversy, Connor, as Itavius Mathers, he was running out to the edge, And yeah, I think Cyrus Jones.
Yeah,
I
Cyrus
think
Jones.
He's the one who knocked the ball, and he scooped it up, returned it for a touchdown. But little face mask, Connor. Where's the call?
It was a big face mask, and I was, like I said, I was into that end zone, but I was on the other side, on the Alabama sideline area, and I mean, you see his head, jerk back.
Obviously, a face mask.
And how that official, I don't know. We've never been there. We've never officiated a major college football game, so I don't want to jump to the statement, to judgments there. But that was bad. It was rough, and it's kind of like if a kicker misses an easy field goal. My point is, if you go to school for free, you should make that field goal. If you're being an official in the SEC, you got to make that call. It's absolutely terrible. And like Free said, our hearts were ripped out. And it took a lot of fight and resilience to play the way Ole Miss did in the second half. It was difficult because Alabama got the ball to start the second half, but they didn't do much with it. The next scoring play was at the 7:20 mark of the third quarter. Bo Wallace hits Laquan Treadwell from 14 yards out. Gary Wunderlich hits the extra point. So that was a huge Ole Miss drive, 4 plays, 66 yards. Only took off a minute and 15, though. So that got Ole Miss back into reach.
Yeah, and they had to, because Alabama was slow, and then Ole Miss, they didn't have much going, and but yeah, the running game just wasn't there. So Bo Wallace had to step up, and he made the right plays as he threw the touchdown to Laquan Treadwell, but only what 72 rushing yards.
Yeah, fortunately, I think our leading receiver had 30-something. Bo Wallace was our leading receiver, leading rusher. I mean, 42 gross yards, but 32 net because of a few sacks. So if you disregard the sacks, Bo Wallace is the leading rusher there, and that's not good. And when your game manager quarterback is the leading rusher, you need to reevaluate your running game. But my point is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Mm-hmm. And people are going to wonder why I say that. We don't need it right now. We beat Alabama without it. I don't think we need to go out of our way majorly to fix the running game. Certainly, we're going to need it down the stretch against teams like Auburn, who are significantly better than Alabama, I think. The Iron Bowl, I don't think the Iron Bowl is going to be anywhere close. It might be close because it's in Bryant-Denny this year in Tuscaloosa, but my gosh. Bo Wallace, like you said, not a huge day. 18 for 31, but no interceptions. So I think it was a huge day.
Yeah. It was key for Wallace, and he had to step up because Tavis Mathers, Jordan Wilkins, Jeremy Liggins, they only had 2 carries apiece, and so Bo kind of had to step up in the running game. Jalen Walton was a little productive as well, but Bo, he made plays on his feet, made plays throwing the football, and he was pretty efficient.
I think Jalen Walton was probably more effective as a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Bo Wallace and Hugh Freeze are really loving that wheel route. This time it was a play that we haven't seen, and we knew we were going to see a lot of plays in this game that we hadn't seen all year. But this is a play that they run a bunch of versions of it, a wheel route to Jalen Walton. He scored against ULL with that play, but it was a different play. It was a fake screen that we run often with Treadwell. I don't know I think it was Treadwell on that side of the ball, but either way, we run that type of screen often in our Ole Miss offense, and they run that motion, and Alabama bit on it. There are a bunch of corners jumping on that play, and Jalen Walton wide open,
one-handed too.
Well, it was funny because it looks like he just snuck it out of the air, but sneakily he snuck that other hand in and then took the hand away. Yeah. So it looks one-handed, but truly I think it was body, hand, but hey. Heck of a catch by Jalen Walton. And then later in the game, they missed the extra point, and then the interception by Sinquez Golson probably going to be I think he still leads the nation.
And the thing with Sinquez Golson is, he's a player who turned down a baseball contract to play football at Ole Miss.
Thank you, Lord.
And then, 2011 he was the internet meme from Trent Richardson. When Trent juked him out, and now just how far he's come. He's a leader on the defense. Had probably the best defensive play in Ole Miss history. I don't know about the best, but the one that will be remembered the most.
Yeah, huge for Sinquez. Very humble. He's all in for this team. We're going to talk about a little bit more about Alabama, and then we're going to bring up Texas A&M coming up. Stay with us. You're listening to Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We are talking about the Rebel victory over the Alabama Crimson Tide. My name's Connor Hennessey alongside my co-host Browning Stubbs, and we're talking about a big weekend in Ole Miss football history. And the history of this game is a lot of crimson. Browning, it's we're looking at the scores, and since a 45-7 loss in Tuscaloosa in October 14th of 2000, Ole Miss has won 3 times, including Saturday. 2001, it was a 27-24 win in Oxford. In 2003, it was a 43-28 win in Oxford, and then in 2014, a 23-17 win this past Saturday.
A lot of close games in between there. One that comes to mind that Ole Miss should have had was a game where Shea Hodge, he got shoved out of bounds but came back inside and caught the ball that would have set up a field goal. And I don't know why Seth Adams wasn't rushing his team to the field to try to get a snap and spike it, but they didn't, and actually they called that one back because he stepped out of bounds.
For illegal touching, yeah.
Yeah, but and then there's been some games where Ole Miss where they went to Tuscaloosa, they were really close, but Alabama under Nick Saban, they've just been very disciplined, and that's why they won. They've had the better coach.
I mean, I agree, and even back to the Houston Nutt days, they had the better coach with Saban, and then Ed Orgeron and Cutcliffe. They had Shula, who was a train wreck, but still had Ole Miss's number.
Mm-hmm.
So train wreck or not, he wrapped this one in crimson and white, that's for sure. But like we were talking about earlier, and like all the media was talking about all week, it's really a program-defining moment. Can Ole Miss stick with it, though? It's a very tough test. It'd be a much different story if Ole Miss was welcoming Texas A&M in this weekend, but instead boarding a plane and heading to College Station, Texas, and to the newly renovated, much larger Kyle Field.
It's going to be exciting, and this is a game that Ole Miss, you mentioned history with Alabama, but history it's with Texas A&M.
6 losses.
I believe that A&M is the only team in the SEC West that Freeze has yet to beat.
It's a sneaky statistic, Browning.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. But for quarterback for A&M was Johnny Manziel, number 2. He's not there this time, but there's a guy named Kenny Hill who might be. I don't know if he's as good as Manziel, but we'll have to see in this test against Ole Miss.
Well,
but yeah,
he got bit in the rear by a bulldog on Saturday.
Oh yeah,
they got stomped in Starkville.
3 interceptions.
Happy for Mississippi State, and I think it's safe to say Dak Prescott, as much as we dislike him because of where we go to school or where we went to school, and Dak Prescott is in the Heisman conversation. He should be.
And Connor, we're talking about the history between Ole Miss and Alabama. This game compared to the 1969 game where Archie Manning at quarterback. Alabama took that one 33-32 in a close game. You had guys like Floyd Franks was on that Ole Miss team, and there's guy Myers. I think his name was Myers. He played for Ole Miss then. But yeah, that was a great game too. And the one that this year was just as good. So I don't know which one was the best.
I think this one because the goalpost came down, and the goalpost made their way to the Grove stage where College Game Day had already taken down all their stuff. Then another one made its way to the square, and
Riley Myers was the name of the Ole Miss player, by the way.
There you go. But back to this year's game, Ole Miss red zone is my favorite statistic. You'll hear me talk about it every week. Ole Miss 2 for 3 in the red zone. Alabama a perfect 2 for 2. Again, another game where the red zone really wasn't a huge factor. I think, just because they executed. Had it been 0 for 3 in the red zone and Ole Miss lost, it would have been a huge issue. But it really wasn't. But Laquan Treadwell, Evan Ingram, the 2 storyline receivers here, 5 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown for Treadwell. Evan Ingram didn't have any touchdowns, but his catches came at a pivotal time of the game. He had a huge, I think, 20-something yard catch late, had a huge drop.
Yes,
I saw your face. I saw your face. A huge drop, undoubtedly was going to be a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean there was
3 catches and 71 yards.
So there was 3 plays in the game where I thought,
they handed it to him.
Yes, and one was the face mask that should have been called.
Yep.
2 was the drop by Ingram, and 3 was the extra point missed.
4 and 5
took the lead at the
4
end.
and 5 for me were the drop interceptions by Cody Pruitt and Deterian Shackelford.
Yep.
DT outran his, but Cody, boy, it was right in your hands. Come on. But, hey, Ole Miss won the game. We don't need to talk about that. You talked about defense. Tony Connor, sophomore out of Batesville, Mississippi, led the team with 10 tackles, had a quarterback hurry, and half of a tackle for loss.
Just great play by the defense, Tony Connor.
And Robert Kimdichie was great, too. Had great penetration on the Alabama line. Last year, he didn't get – I don't think he got a tackle in the Alabama game last year. If he did, it wasn't anything good. So he may have been limping or something, but this year he was in the backfield. I don't think he had any huge numbers. It doesn't matter if he had huge numbers. There's play after play after play where Robert Kimdichie, let's say 5 tackles on the day, where Robert Kimdichie was in the backfield.
And he was all over the place.
Isaac Gross was back there. Trey Elston, speaking of which, has been suspended internally by Coach Hugh Freeze, which was upheld by the Southeastern Conference. He will not play in the first half of the Texas A&M game for an action where he attempted to stomped on. Either way it happened, extended his leg towards the head of Kenyon Drake after Drake's gruesome leg injury.
And
so it adds insult to injury, literally.
Yeah, unfortunately, Drake broke his leg. He'll miss
the season.
Probably, you're right.
He might be back for the bowl game. It could be an Evan Ingram situation where he gets back and is about 80% for the bowl game. But who knows? Alabama may not go bowling. Just kidding.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think Hugh Freeze has named a starter in Elston's in his replacement for Saturday. I don't think he's named who's going to start yet. But I mean,
David Kamara, C.J. Moore, C.J. Hampton, Mike Hilton
will have to step up. Yeah, for sure. It'll be someone like that for sure.
Yep. So when we're talking about the Texas A&M Aggies coming up on the other side of this break, Billy Liucci, TexAgs.com, and Maroon and White Report will join us. Stay with us. You're listening to Hotty Toddy Hotline. Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're talking in this week's opponent, the Texas A&M Aggies at Kyle Field in College Station, Texas. Billy Liucci of TexAgs.com and Maroon and White Report joining us on Hotty Toddy Hotline this week. Tough loss on the road over the weekend to Mississippi State. How do you rebound this week at home against Ole Miss, Billy?
Well, I think for starters, actually, I think the only way A&M rebounds against this Ole Miss squad is to first of all, I think they need to take a long look in the mirror. That they're the team that didn't match Mississippi State. They matched their intensity at the beginning. A&M went right down and scored, but over the course of throughout the first half of that game, it was clear that Mississippi State was prepared to come in there and take the fight to A&M. And I didn't think the Aggies bounced back and fought back the way you'd want to see, just in terms of matching their intensity. Not laying down and rolling over or anything like that, but it just was a game that was Ole Miss. You were walking into a hornet's nest, and I think if you looked at everything about that game, from the off week to them coming off the LSU win to playing at home to 2 years of frustration, kind of at the expense of the Aggies, or at their expense, courtesy of the Aggies, you just really could see it coming. You knew what you were going to get in terms of that level of intensity, and A&M really didn't match it, and that's the first thing they're going to have to do, and that part I think should be the easy part. You're playing at home. It's the first important game at all at the new Kyle Field. It just so happens to be now against the number 3 team in the country, an SEC game, and backed into a corner there. So I don't think that part's going to be the problem. The other part of the equation is where it gets really interesting, and that's the Aggie offense. For 2 weeks in a row, they've struggled after going right down the field and scoring on the game opening possession. From that point on, they've really struggled. They turned it on against Arkansas in the fourth quarter, and they were never really able to turn it on against Mississippi State, despite 540 yards and 31 very misleading points. So there's a matchup, and it's going to be incredibly difficult because, in my opinion, I'm sure you guys probably feel the same, they're playing against the best defense in the SEC on Saturday. So you've got an offense that's had some woes against Arkansas and Mississippi State, and for the third week in a row, the defense is going to get better as you go take on the Rebels. So I don't know how they're going to do it, but that's what they've got to do in order to win this thing. If you watch those two Ole Miss A&M games the last 2 years, A&M's ripped them up, and about 75% of what they've done to Ole Miss has been either off Johnny Manziel scrambles or him just making, flat out making plays. And
Billy, this is Brownie Stubbs here, Hotty Toddy Hotline, and you mentioned those last two games against Ole Miss in the last 2 years. From a fan perspective, I'm sure you're close to the team, but do you really think that that A&M fans felt that they truly won those two games, or do you think that Ole Miss may have handed them a victory?
I think A&M would feel like they won the second one for sure. I mean, to me, that was just a back and forth game with both teams. Ole Miss making plays against a bad A&M defense, and A&M making plays because they had the best player in college football. And I think the handed one would have been that first time when I thought Hugh Freeze made a horrible decision to line up in shotgun on 4th and inches. I mean, even punting that ball in that instance, A&M had gone right down the field, but it was that was the first time, really, since the first quarter that they took it on down and scored like that. And even to punt it, but if you're going to go for it, as soon as he lined up in a shotgun, I said they're trying to give this one away. But I don't. At the end of the day, Ole Miss didn't have an answer for Johnny Manziel, and he's not there anymore. So I think that's a real issue for an A&M offense that's going up against a team that, on paper, is the type of team that would have a lot of success against this A&M spread offense, which because they're so fast, they can fly around to the football, they can get to the perimeter, they're good enough up front to stick with a 4-man rush if they want to, and they can contain that running game without having to outnumber A&M in the box. And then with the secondary being the strength of, I think, your football team, that would not seem to bode well for A&M, whereas last week they're playing a defensive backfield where it seemed tailor-made. Not that Mississippi State wasn't going to be any good because we know how strong they are on the front seven, but the strength of their team is really power in the front seven, and no one really talks about that secondary. And if A&M struggled as bad as they did against them, then if you're trying to project that out, it's going to take a night and day different performance from the Aggie offense to be able to stay in this one. What's interesting to me is in 2 years, with the exception of the fourth quarter last season, if you go back and look at that, for 7 quarters against A&M, the Ole Miss offense is really what hasn't been very strong, even against what was last year was a horrible A&M defense. Again, I go and I say the fourth quarter because Ole Miss erupted in that fourth quarter, but that's the matchup maybe that keeps A&M in it when you look at it, because everyone's real quick to dismiss this Aggie defense after last week, and I think they've got real issues at middle linebacker and in terms of coverage. But for whatever reason, Ole Miss hasn't necessarily lit that defense up, and they obviously haven't done so to anybody this year yet either. But that's how that game's close, and obviously you play a close game at home, you'll take your chances. And those two things just, I think, have to happen for A&M to have a shot at this one.
Now you're coming off a painful loss to Mississippi State after a huge opener at South Carolina, having a good year up until, and still are having a good year, but go to Starkville and just get waxed by Mississippi State. You know this team better than we do. Do you think they're going to come in down with an Ole Miss team obviously coming in on an up and up after beating a good Alabama team? Do you think they're going to come in this game down, or do you think they're going to come in hungry, ready to give Ole Miss a fight?
I don't think there's any question. They're going to come in hungry, and it's going to be, and I think Hugh Freeze and Ole Miss, Hugh Freeze and his staff are probably really instilling that to their players this week, because Ole Miss, has kind of the alternate worry there, which is, how long are you going to get patted on the back all week, or are you going to come in focused up on playing a good A&M team, or are you going to look at what happened to them last week and just kind of say, we're going to go in there and roll these guys? Fortunately for Hugh Freeze, they've got, like Mississippi State, 2 years of frustration where they, especially in the Mississippi State side, it's like you asked earlier, I don't know what the fans are thinking. I know what I saw when I saw those games. I just saw two teams battle it out. I guarantee everybody in that Ole Miss locker room thinks they should beat A&M both years, and they certainly could have. So I think that's gonna negate whatever kind of hangover that the Rebels need to worry about. But as far as A&M, yeah, Ole Miss is definitely going to get their best shot. I think the word that you're looking for, though, that could come into play is this team going to be fragile? You know, are they going to come out and really want this thing early, but if a couple things don't go their way, then where's their psyche at after last week? You know, I think that's probably what to look for maybe more than anything, is if they come out playing well, and then one or two things happen that work against them, how do they respond? That'll be the test as to whether or not they're able to maintain that level, or if things will get easier for Ole Miss as the game goes on.
Billy, what is your assessment of Kenny Hill, and what are some things that he can work on?
Well, I think as a first-year starting quarterback, he's outstanding. I mean, he's been pretty terrific. Even in the game the other day, you know, he threw 2 of the 3 interceptions were on him. The third one should not have been picked off. It was a drop by a receiver, kicked up in the air. But I think, you know, to me, what Kenny could do better is sometimes take the easy stuff. If you go back, I went back and really broke down that game film, and a lot of Kenny's throws were to open receivers, but they were deeper down the field when he had the easy stuff underneath for, you know, 7 yards, maybe 10 yards, depending on what the guy could do, and pass that up a lot of times. And when you're playing a fast-moving defense that's really good in the front 7, and you're on the road, I think, you know, first downs are very important. Now, that game was 7-7 until the final seconds of the first quarter. You know, first downs are very important. And when your receivers are dropping passes the way A&M's were, then you might want to make the easy throws. So I think that's one thing he can do, and he can be a little more accurate. We counted 15 drop passes in that game, which is insane. Those 15 drops, you know, probably half of them you could go, well, he could have made a little better throw. They should have been caught by, you know, quality college receivers, no doubt. But if the throw would have been a little better, maybe they would have been. So maybe work some on that accuracy, but also just kind of taking what's there, if you know what I mean, especially on first and second down, to set them up for better. They need to be a little bit more surgical in what they do in the passing game. So, and especially this week, with as much pressure as they're likely to see, if something's there, you better take it. So those are the areas I think Kenny can improve. But really, the kid was 37 of 62, and if you're being kind, he had 10 or 12 drops. And, you know, you could have been looking at a 50 or 62 type game, which is insane to even think of. But he, you know, obviously that didn't happen. You got issues at receiver without Malcolm Kennedy, who may or may not play, because he's your only returning veteran at the position. And I think that was masked because at South Carolina secondary played so soft. It was fun. It was fool's gold for those guys. They weren't really challenged, other than just running around and catching passes. The last 2 games, they've been challenged by an opposing SEC West secondary, and it's kind of like they're kind of having to adjust to it. And so we'll see if they get any better in that regard this week when they play the best secondary they've seen.
And, Billy, there's got to be a winner and there's got to be a loser. What's your prediction?
If I was picking this one, I think because of what I've seen in the last 2 years from Ole Miss and kind of what problems they've presented to this A&M offense, they've taken away that horizontal passing game that A&M kind of turns into their running game at times, and they've taken away the A&M running game. I think it's going to be tough sledding for the Aggie offense, but I think they'll hang in a while. I think Ole Miss wins this one and pulls away late, and then you know, A&M's got to go. They'll have to go to Alabama after that. get an off week in Louisiana Monroe, and then it's Auburn. So 4 or 5 weeks you're going to play teams ranked in the current top 6. 3 of those 4 on the road. It's a brutal stretch, which makes this game, I think, the most important game of the Texas A&M season. Because if you can somehow win this one, the whole deal turns around. This conversation we're having almost sounds laughable a week from now, because then you're going into Alabama and kind of playing a game to move back up into the SEC. You and whoever wins, it's probably A&M, Auburn, Mississippi State after that, if they can pull that off. So it changes quickly in this league, as we learned last week. But the Aggies, I'm just going with Ole Miss in this one. And it's the first time this year I'm picking against A&M, but they're just going to have to. They're going to really, I think, have to play a flawless game at home to win it. So I think that's a tall order right now, because what people don't realize, and they forgot after that South Carolina game, A&M is an insanely young football team, easily the youngest in the West, and probably one of the youngest, one, 2 or 3 youngest in the entire conference. And that showed on Saturday against Mississippi State.
Billy Liucci, thanks so much for joining us this week. Big game. We'll see you down there this weekend.
All right, looking forward to it.
We'll be right back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. More coming up. Back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. A lot of good stuff from Billy Liucci. He helps host Maroon and White Report down in College Station, found on the Serum Sports Family Networks. You can find that all across the Lone Star State. As I said earlier, he also writes for TexAgs.com. Thanks so much, Billy, for joining us. He picked Ole Miss, Browning, and I think he's right. I think Ole Miss, this was, I'm not going to say a trap game because it's in College Station. It's going to be a tough win if it happens. But you look at Ole Miss history, and this is when the loss will come in Ole Miss history.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to 2009 when they were ranked number 4 in the country.
Went to South Carolina and got waxed.
Yeah, and then that was a Thursday night game. This will be a Saturday night game, hostile environment, and really, it's going to be tough, and all the pressure will be on the Rebels. Like the whole, I mean, it's good,
Can they rise to the occasion?
Exactly.
That's the ultimate question. I mean,
because by the way Tennessee, the way that they performed, which we'll talk about that later, but against Florida, I feel
Tennessee's the biggest trap game of the schedule left, I think.
Yeah, but I was kind of shocked they lost to Florida.
They should have won. They should have beaten Florida. They should have beaten Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
They don't lose their starting quarterback against Georgia. They win that game. But coulda, woulda, shoulda in the Southeastern Conference. And I was going to ask Billy, but we kind of ran out of time, running up against a break. But the SEC West is a gauntlet right now, and if you lose, I'm thinking the Western Division champion is going to have one loss. Yep. The Iron Bowl or the Egg Bowl are going to be the games that decide the West. That's truly how I feel. Probably the Iron Bowl because Auburn. But if it comes down to Ole Miss, Mississippi State, I think one of those schools is going to have one loss or 2 losses. One of them is going to have one loss going into it. And you're going to hand the other team their second loss. It's going to be the tie for the SEC West. The winner goes to Atlanta. Picture perfect Egg Bowl, November 29th, Thanksgiving weekend. I think that's how the West is going to play out. That's my pick. I think Auburn may trip up by then.
I agree. I think the Egg Bowl and the Iron Bowl. So probably whoever wins those games on the last week of the season could be the 2 teams in Atlanta.
Well, one of the 2, yeah. Whoever.
One, yeah.
Because you can't have 2 teams from the West, but wish you could. They should this year because the East is so terrible. But, one of those teams may be a 3-way tie. Mm-hmm. You tie with Ole Miss, and then Auburn may be in there too. What if Ole Miss wins the head-to-head on both? Atlanta. Good. Just saying it can happen, folks.
But, about Texas A&M, if there's, I was at SEC Media Days over the summer, and I asked Cody Pruitt a question. I kind of got ridiculed by it because I said, who is the number 1 team that you lost to a season ago that you need to beat this year? And in one word, he said, State. But I'm not so sure, Connor. The last two,
I think it's about both of them. It's both of them.
because the last 2 years you have given A&M a victory.
Especially year one. I mean, especially year one, where Billy alluded to it when he said the play call, shotgun, 4th and 1. Ooh. You ultimately make that a 4th and 4 at that point.
And then when A&M was driving on the possession before that, Johnny Manziel, there was a questionable call whether his knee went down in the end zone, if that was a safety or not.
Well, and then later in the game, they have them. That's the same play. I'm sorry. Later in that drive, you have them at the 3-yard line, and he runs 90. They drive 97 yards for a touchdown.
Yikes!
Johnny,
Ole Miss has got to win this one after what happened the last 2 years.
Well, what you got to do is your cornerback's got to play well. You're going to have a hole with Trey Elston for quarters 1 and 2. Not a huge issue. Fans, I don't think you should read too much into it. Ole Miss is a second-half team. They've been a huge second-half team under Coach Hugh Freeze. We're thin at that position, but there's other guys that can move around. Mm-hmm. Derek Jones can always play in corner and move Mike Hilton or Sinquez around and play Trey Elston's spot. So it's certainly not that big of a tall task, I don't think, to fill in Trey's shoes there. Again, Trey Elston sitting out for the first half of the Texas A&M game. I think this is the game where Ole Miss's running game is going to show up. Mm-hmm. Jalen Walton, Mark Dodson, Octavius Mathers, and Jordan Wilkins. Those guys are going to have a day.
Have to, because we didn't see we only saw Jalen Walton, out of the backs really come through against Bama. So it's got to be a redemption game, and with how bad A&M their rush defense is, Ole Miss should take advantage.
Yeah, and I think, really just how bad A&M's defense is, back to being a Big 12 defense, back in their Big 12 days, and I think certainly Ole Miss has the opportunity to come in here or go in there and I'm not going to say do what Mississippi State did, but Billy may be right. Ole Miss could pull away and make this one a game that is a little misleading at the end of the day. The score, I don't think the score may either way. If Ole Miss loses or wins, I don't think the score is going to reflect that of the game. We're coming up on our final segment here. We're going to go around the SEC like we do around this time every week, and we're going to recap some other Ole Miss sports. That is coming up on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're back. Hotty Toddy Hotline, final segment. Connor Hennessey here, Browning, Stubbs there. Browning, we've been talking about the Alabama win, the goalpost coming down, $50,000 fine for Ole Miss for fans entering the playing surface. Trey Elston is suspended for the first half. Bo Wallace named the Offensive Player of the Week in the Southeastern Conference for his performance against Alabama. Congratulations, Bo. Very much deserved. Congratulations to Richie Brown, who is the Defensive Player of the Week from Mississippi State. Sinquez Golson deserved it more. Sorry. But let's go around the SEC, Browning. We do this every time this week. Number 11, Ole Miss, 23, Alabama, 17. Huge. On to the next. That one's in the trash, as Hugh Freeze said. Number 5, Auburn. I think this is the story of the weekend besides the one down in Starkville. Auburn, 41, LSU, 7.
I think Les Miles with that Michigan job opening.
Not a chance. He has 2 kids at U-High in Baton Rouge. He's significant ties to the Baton Rouge community. He's nearly 60 years old. He's not leaving Baton Rouge. He's going to retire before he gets run out of there. Mississippi State 48, Texas A&M 31. Story of the weekend.
Shocking. I'm not shocked that State won, but just the way they ran over A&M, just dominated the football game.
As much as I hate to say it, Dak Prescott, Heisman conversation without question. Georgia 44. Poor Vanderbilt, 17. The ship is sinking in Commodore Land.
Anchor is down.
Anchor's pulling them down. Kentucky, 45. South Carolina, 38.
Unbelievable.
The story of the East.
Kentucky, they are...
They are going to win the East, and Ole Miss is going to play them in Atlanta.
That would be... I don't think anyone would have predicted that.
Talk about the storyline of the SEC championship.
Wow.
The headlines of that newspaper that follow... Oh, my gosh. Whatever. Florida 10, Tennessee 9. The heart is being ripped out of the
Driscoll played
Volunteers.
awful in that game, too.
And now their backup quarterback suspended on sexual assault charge. So Driscoll's getting another chance.
It's a mess. And Tennessee, I mean, I thought they were going to be on the rise this year, but they're 2-3 now. So.
Tennessee, I'm sorry, they are capable of winning the East as bad as they are, but that's around the SEC, and that's the SEC East for you. Announced today earlier this week by Ole Miss Athletics, Ole Miss and Georgia Tech will play a home-and-home football series in 2022 and 2023. Wow.
Hey, Connor, I got one quick question about the East and the West. If you power ranked all 14 teams, would you rank all 7 of the West teams ahead of
yes
the first place in the East? You would?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I would. The reason I say that is because they talked about that on the SEC Network last week. They said LSU is last in the West, and they think LSU is still significantly better than anybody from the East.
Interesting. Well, I mean,
right now,
we'll have to see how Georgia plays.
I can't say I agree yet, but there's nothing to tell me otherwise right now. Yeah. Right now, we're in week 7 of the football season coming up or this week. Nothing has told me otherwise that all 7 Western Division teams are not better than the Eastern Division teams. But back to that Georgia Tech home and home. The Rebels head to Atlanta in 2022, and then the Yellow Jackets come here in 2023. Yeah, we're gonna be old by then, Browning.
And the Rebels will go back to Atlanta, which is I think Atlanta and Nashville are always 2 fun places to play.
Awesome, we got great places to travel to and welcome in an ACC team. Or with all the conference changes, they might not even be in the ACC by the time they come here. Around other Rebel sports, Ole Miss soccer getting the win in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Browning, a big weekend over the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, the soccer, they had a tough loss to A&M last Sunday.
And then draw Auburn.
Yeah, so I mean it was big that they were able to
12
bounce back
draws
to beat Alabama.
Got a lot of draws for this team.
So much overtime.
It's better. Well, hey, it's better than losing.
That's right.
So, but a big win on the road in Tuscaloosa. The Rebels doing well under head coach Matt Mott. Volleyball with a big win over Missouri last week.
In 3 sets, too.
Swept the Tigers.
The
Get your
defending
brooms
SEC
out.
champion, Missouri Tigers.
Get your daggum brooms out. The volleyball players are just, woo. And congratulations to Taylor Alexander, freshman out of Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. She's been honored with SEC Freshman of the Week. My man. It's been a big week in Rebel sports, y'all. And we're hoping for an even bigger one down in College Station. But game time, 8 o'clock Central Time, Kyle Field on ESPN. See you there, Browning.
See you there.
All right, that's all the time we have this week for executive producer John Rawl and Browning Stubbs. You can find Browning every week, 12 to 1 on Thursdays on Rebel Radio. My name is Connor Hennessey. You've been listening to Hotty Toddy Hotline, a production of CRM Sports on the Colonel Reb Radio Network. Same time, same place next week.